Hello everyone, welcome to Planet Linux. I'm glad that you found this video. Today we'll be taking a look at a few different Linux distributions, those that are the most user-friendly and good-looking. The reason this is important is because a lot of people want an operating system that is easy to navigate, easy to get around, and allows them to get their work done quickly and efficiently while looking good at the same time. You want something that is pleasing to look at and use on a daily basis. With that in mind, all of the distros we'll be looking at today will focus on two main aspects. The first is the ease of use. All of these distributions are meant to be easy to navigate and easy for anyone to pick up and use, whether you're new to computers or you've used Linux for a few years already. And the second aspect is a visually appealing interface. All of these are meant to look good. You can like minimalistic interfaces as much as the next guy, but in the end, a lot of people want something that makes computing fun to do, something you're happy to look at and use on a daily basis, because, let's face it, we use our computers all the time now. And I want to note that these distributions I'm talking about are in no particular order. This isn't really a ranking, so if the distro you think should be, or if a distro on this list isn't where you think it should be, there's no rank to this. These are all just my thoughts as a list of distributions that I think are very easy to use and that look good while you use them. With that being said, as you can see here, the first one we'll be taking a look at is Elementary OS. If you've taken a look at Elementary before, it's nearly indisputable that this is a very good looking Linux distribution. It's very polished and a very consistent look that's familiar for most computer users. And in fact, that's the first thing I want to talk about, is the familiarity. The fact that looking at Elementary OS here, it's an interface and a style that, if you've used a computer before, you're probably very familiar with, especially if you've used Mac OS. Even if you haven't used Mac before, you're not a fan of Apple, whatever it is, this is an interface and a Linux distribution that you can pick up and start learning to use very quickly and easily. Having the dock along the bottom with pinned applications that you use most often, as well as all of your open apps, is very simple. And the panel along the top, it not only looks very good, but it's very functional and easy to understand. Having a nice clean looking application drawer here at the top left that you can either view in a categorized or a grid view gives a lot of options and is very simple for users to find what they're looking for, along with the search box here. Of course, being able to click on the time and date to get a pop-up calendar, while that may seem simple, is of course very helpful. And all of the notification buttons here along the right not only look very polished, but they're actually really functional. For example, the volume control not only lets you adjust the volume, but also manage your music playback. Another note is that each of these notification icons also gives you direct access to that system settings page. For example, under volume, we have a button here that can take us directly to the sound settings. Under networks, we have one directly for network settings, and so on for Bluetooth and notifications. Of course, we have an easy-to-use user switcher and power management, allowing you to easily switch between numerous users, as well as turn off, lock, and log off your system. The second thing here with Elementary OS is a consistent and modern theme. Just about every built-in application on this system looks good. It has consistent theming throughout with window decorations and borders and title bars and color schemes. If we open a few different applications here, you'll notice that all of them have a very consistent look. They all look very polished, and just about any GTK-based application looks very good on here in Elementary OS. Qt applications also generally render very well, and when they do, they look good as well. You'll have the few that just look a little funky, but that happens with a lot of GTK-based visuals in Linux distributions. Also, a quick note is the wallpapers are very good in Elementary OS. If we take a quick look, they're all very vibrant, very colorful, as we take a look at a few different ones here. And they really brighten up the computer, and that's something that you may not think too much of visually, but it really does make the computer look that much more enjoyable to use. Also, going along with the polish and consistency of themes, you notice that as I change backgrounds, the text on this top panel will change color based on the coloring of the background. For example, here there's a much lighter background, so the text is now black, so that you can see it against the light background. If I switch to a background here with a much darker color, the text turns white, so you can see it. And in the case of some backgrounds here, such as this one, we get a translucent shadow along the panel here as the background is numerous shades of different colors that makes it easy to see against your background. It's just little things like that that truly show how polished Elementary OS is, and having an easy to use interface along with it makes this really a great distribution for both new users as well as anyone that just wants a good looking Linux distribution. One last thing is the all-in-one Software Center and Update Manager. This isn't new to Linux distributions, and others besides Elementary have something like this, but just as someone, especially a new user to Linux, this is something very helpful, having both the software manager, which looks very good by the way, as well as the update center, where you can manage your updates all in one place. Makes it very simple to manage all of your software, whether you're getting new software or updating existing software on your system. Now let's go take a look at our next Linux distribution on this list. Second, we're taking a look at /Linux Olaf. I've recently done a review of this on my channel, so if you've seen that, some of this may be familiar to you, but I do have a few reasons here why this is another Linux distribution that deserves to be called both user-friendly and good-looking. In the good looks category, we have the customized KDE shell here, known as the // shell. And this is not only good looking, but also very user-friendly. It makes a lot of common functions that you do throughout your operating system on a daily basis very simple and very streamlined. One of the biggest highlights here is this universal application menu bar that is specific to whatever application you have open. It saves space on your screen, and it's really functional. The whole interface here really has a lot of tweaks in it with the / shell that really make the K desktop environment more functional than it normally is when it comes standard in a distribution. And in that regard, /Linux Olaf really does shine, and it is one of the most user-friendly distributions that runs on KDE that I have ever seen. The simple menu here is very easy to find your applications, and of course, besides your notifications and clock, you also have quick access to your users over here, which is very nice. The dock along the bottom, I know I've been focusing on the dock a lot lately in these distributions, but it is very helpful, and it's great, as I mentioned before with Elementary, for new users, as well as people that just want a clean interface to navigate around their system. Second is the fantastic app selection that comes with /Linux Olaf. This isn't what you typically find with most KDE distributions, and it focuses on giving you the best applications that you could possibly have for a specific task. And especially for new users that are looking to just jump in and use a distribution out of the box, this is fantastic. By default, of course, it uses Dolphin for the file manager, which is definitely a good choice. It's my personal favorite. And it uses Chromium for the web browser, but where it really gets interesting is having the maps and calendar applications here, which are both GNOME-based apps, unlike KDE. And while that may seem a little strange to people who are familiar with Linux, for a new user or someone who just wants useful applications right out of the box, this is really a great move. And finally, this actually brings me into my third and final point with Backlash. The fact that just about all applications, both Qt and GTK applications, render very well with the theming on this system. You'll notice that, for example, when I have the calendar app open, as well as the system settings app, keeping in mind that system settings is a Qt app and the calendar application is a GTK app. Noticing how consistent their theming is, how the title bars are very similar, and they both follow similar theme standards. They all render properly. And if you've used Linux a lot before, you'll know that this is not always the case. A lot of times KDE has issues rendering GTK apps properly and using the right themes. So it's nice to see that everything just looks very consistent across the entire operating system. And that's something that Backlash Olaf achieves very well. Having this customized shell experience, it really brings everything together in a user-friendly and very consistent interface. So I've noticed that the first 3 entries on this list have all had dock-based interfaces. No need to worry, I promise that the next 2 will not. So, no worries there. As you may be able to tell, for this one we're looking at Deepin. This is version 15.4, as it's had some major visual overhauls since the previous versions. Now, I do want to mention before I get into this, I understand there has been some controversy about security and privacy concerns with Deepin, and I personally have gone through and monitored network traffic and run my own tests with that, and personally have not found any reasons to be concerned with it. I'm not saying that there aren't issues. There may be, there may not be. But nonetheless, personally, I have not found anything. So now that that is out of the way, let's take a look here. The main reasons that I have Deepin on this list is just because it really gives an interface that on the surface may look relatively familiar, having a dock down here. You may initially think it just looks a lot like other distributions that have a similar Mac OS-like style. And on the surface, yes, it kind of does look like that, but there's actually a lot of functionality here that you don't normally see. And that, for example, in the dock here, this is more than just a dock to pin your applications and view your open apps on. There's really a lot of functionality here. Of course, here on the left, it's pretty self-explanatory. We have a launcher icon, which pulls up kind of this full-screen launcher view that you can view either in a category or as a grid, once again, owing to the Mac sort of style. We have a Show Desktop button, which toggles between open windows and your desktop. This multitasking view, not something you normally find on a dock, at least in Linux, and it looks a lot, once again, kind of like the Mission Controller expose view on Mac. Of course, then we do have a lot of pinned applications here, as well as all of your open apps. This also has a system tray combined in the dock, though, so notifications here, such as my simple screen recorder, show up, as well as a button to bring up power settings, logging off, switching users, shutting down the system. Volume control, and this is interesting. You can, of course, click this to get a regular volume control, but you can actually scroll with your mouse wheel while you're on this icon to adjust the volume. And something that you really don't see anywhere else, at least I certainly haven't. It's very interesting. Of course, then we have your networks here, and a clock, as well as the trash. And what just popped up there a second ago when I clicked on networks takes me into the final thing I really wanted to show here. The Deepin Control Center. And you can access it via the Control Center settings icon down here. And when you go into this, you get a sort of grid interface on this sidebar. And this really is where you control all of the settings on your computer. It's much different than you normally see in Linux, where you'd have a typical settings window with all of your options. We have, of course, the date and time up here, with all of your settings here and some other shortcuts. You can actually scroll this, I believe, and get weather and notifications as well. This, of course, isn't an in-depth review, so I'm not going to go into this much, but it's just something that it's very clean and not something you find in most places. It stays out of your way. It lets you change settings on the fly without having to dig through a bunch of windows and such. It's just a little thing on the side here that you can access whenever you need to, and it doesn't get in the way of your other applications. So, in the overall visual style here of Deepin, you'll notice with right-click menus and such, it has a very clean, modern, sort of translucent style that, yeah, it does look a lot like Mac OS in a lot of ways, but is that necessarily a bad thing? I don't think so when it comes to aesthetics. The wallpapers here are very good as well. Let's see, set wallpaper. A lot of different choices here. And so Deepin's one of those things, it's not a typical distribution, and it's tough for me to recommend just because it's not very popular. There have been concerns with privacy and security in the past. That's not to say there actually are issues, but there has been talk about it. And it's a shame because it does a lot of things well, and it's very user-friendly. So I may do an in-depth review at some point, and we'll see what my thoughts are on it at that point once I look at this more. But as far as user-friendliness, I think this is certainly has done a decent job, especially with the control center. And visually, I mean, I think we can all agree this certainly looks very modern. It kind of has that flat design that you tend to see in more modern themes these days. So visually, definitely, Deepin does a very good job there. The second to last distribution we're looking at today is Netrunner. And while Netrunner certainly won't win any awards in the visuals category, it really does make up for it in simplicity. The K desktop environment, or KDE, is typically known to be a flashier sort of desktop environment and is known for its smooth aesthetics and animations. And Netrunner has stripped a lot of that out. But that being said, it is definitely one of the more usable distributions that run on KDE. And they've done a lot to make this a really good distribution for new users. An example here is their customized launcher here. Not something you typically see in KDE, but it does have this nice graphical icon layout with your categories here along the right side. And you'll notice that there aren't too many animations. We have quick little minimize and restore animations, but as far as opening windows and dragging them around, there really isn't anything too flashy in regards to animations, especially like you'd normally see in KDE. There's been some slight theming here. The theme is a bit darker than you normally find, with a little bit of color adjustment to the title bars. It looks like there's a bit more of a bluish tint. And they've done a few modifications throughout the operating system. For example, in Dolphin, the file manager, we've got this toolbar here by default with some quick options, and the preview pane here on the right side that shows details. And it's little things like that. It feels like the Netrunner team has really tried to streamline KDE down and get rid of a lot of the bulkiness that it's had in the past, and really bring out its core elements that overall just makes the system easier to use. So while if you're looking for a really flashy distribution, Netrunner may not be for you, this is definitely one of the easiest to use distros that run KDE. And honestly, if you're someone that's coming from Windows or a similar operating system, it's a layout that's relatively similar. And I know there are plenty of distributions that have this panel along the bottom with a main menu and such, but it feels like a very good implementation, especially compared to how KDE normally is. I feel like this would also run quite a bit better on slightly lower end hardware than you normally find with KDE. So if you want to give a KDE distribution a try, but you haven't really been a fan of it in the past, or you're new to Linux, this may be a decent one to try out. Like I said, it's not flashy, but it certainly does its job well, and it's pretty darn easy to get around, especially compared to most KDE distributions. Finally here, we're taking a look at Linux Mint. This is the Cinnamon edition, of course using the Cinnamon desktop environment. And this is definitely the most well-known distribution on this list. But nonetheless, I think it is definitely one that is a fantastic choice for both new users, someone who's new to Linux, but also people that just want a really stable system that works well and has a lot of features. Linux Mint isn't the absolute flashiest of all distributions, especially with the Cinnamon environment, but it does look very good. And it definitely strikes a balance between the visuals and the functionality. It's very feature rich. And the theming is consistent throughout. Of course, being Linux Mint, they've got a very green look to things. But throughout the entire operating system, the theming is very good looking. Some minor animations that give a very smooth appearance to everything. Also, I love the software and update managers in Linux Mint. They, once again, aren't necessarily the most beautiful looking, but they're very functional, and they do look good. Just maybe not the absolute best looking on the market, but they do work very well. They're very functional, and something a new user can definitely get used to very quickly. And along with having an interface that just overall looks honestly very similar to a Windows, especially like a Windows 7 kind of styled interface here. It's just overall an all-around great choice for a Linux distribution. There's a ton of software available. It's very easy to download and install. And that's just really what Linux Mint comes down to. It's overall just all around great. It's not like it does any individual thing so much better than everything else, but it does so many things very good that it's hard to overlook. You know, it looks visually pleasing. It has numerous themes to pick from, and customize how you want. You can of course download additional themes, much as you can with most distributions. Has a great selection of apps installed by default, with a great software center and update manager when it comes to getting and updating software. It's just something that no matter what your intent is, what you plan on using Linux for, you really should look at Linux Mint. It comes in 4 desktop environments, excuse me. But I would certainly give the Cinnamon edition a try. So this concludes the list looking at the Linux distros that I believe are either the best looking or the most user friendly. And if anyone out there has other suggestions, please let me know. I'll likely be reviewing each of these distributions separately in their own videos if I haven't done so already. So stay tuned for those. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If there's anything you'd like to say, let me know. Post in the comments. If you have any suggestions, questions, concerns, I'll do my best to reply to you. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, as well as click the little notification bell button next to that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with upcoming videos. I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I'll see you next time.